All right, so thank you for being part of our December webinar on cybersecurity and K12 schools. We have kind of a roundtable discussion. I'm going to let all of the participants kind of introduce themselves when we get to that point. We're going to go through some questions that we have, but if any attendees have a question, you can just put them into the chat. I'll make sure that we get those addressed, and we do have a section at the end for any last questions we have. So again, if you have a question you want asked while we're going through this, just kind of put it into the chat, and I'll keep track of that. I'm going to share my screen so we get the little slide deck going so everybody can see that. All right. And you'll have to bear with me because all my controls went to a different page. All right, can everybody see the questions? Oh. Everybody see the slide deck okay? Awesome. One more second. I'm going to pin all of you if I can. Add pin. Add pin. Sorry, I'm just making sure everybody gets pinned. I'll even pin myself, I guess. All right, so here we are. Why can't everybody introduce themselves? Oh, sorry. I'm trying to move my controls. I swear I've done a Zoom before. So I'll kind of let Dan, if you want to go first.
You bet. So I'm Dan Rader. I'm one of the board members for iTech and also am the Director of Technology for Ames Community Schools.
I'm Lance Lennon. I'm the Director of Technology for the Eagle Grove Community School District and the iTech Vendor Coordinator.
I'm Scott Fossine, Systems Engineer, Prairie Lakes AEA, been in the position since 1996 and helping schools since then.
Hey everyone, Landon Allen. I'm the Chief Information Officer with the Ottumwa Community School District, and with me I have
Tyler Courtney. I'm the Senior Network and Systems Administrator for Ottumwa Schools.
All right, well, thank you guys for being part of this. So again, got kind of a lot of different experiences here and backgrounds. I'm just going to be kind of leading things. I spent 1 year as a tech director, so we don't have to worry about that. I don't know anything. All right, so we'll kind of get to the first question. I can move people out of the way. What do you think is the biggest challenge in regards to cybersecurity for K-12 schools in Iowa?
Well, if we're not going to go in any particular order, for me, and I can tell you the biggest challenge in cybersecurity is human error. That the fact that that's the biggest way people are going to get in is I'm going to have users on my end who are going to fall for a phishing scam, who are going to have an easy to pick password or have it written down somewhere where someone can get to it, or use the same password for every damn thing they have. So the human factor.
So I'm going to say probably the biggest challenge I see with the schools that I work with is, and probably nationwide, is that I think a lot of administration thinks that cybersecurity is a technology problem. So, the tech directors have it. There might be things that, trying to get it conveyed that you have a tech team that includes administration, your business office, HR, principals. It's a organization-wide issue on it, and without having that part of it, it's expecting tech teams, or even in a lot of schools that I work with, a single tech person be responsible for it all. It's just you have to be able to cover all points of have to have a team to turn around and make sure you got everything covered and who's going to work with it.
I think kind of to tie in a little bit to what Scott just said, one of the things I noted was just the amount of logs that our teams are now trying to digest from all the various services and appliances that we have, whether or not it's a CrowdStrike alert, a firewall log, it's a Defender alert. There's so much for a small staff to digest that a product like an XDR or SIM solution would answer some of those problems. They're just not cost effective at the moment for school districts. And so I think we find ourselves trying to figure out, we have all this great information, but we can't react in a timely manner when we're sifting through, as many logs as we do on a daily basis.
Yeah, and to tack on that a little bit, So for the organizations who don't maybe have the funding for all these fancy cyber solutions, you're pretty much stuck doing it internally. So I think in my role, the biggest challenge is just shifting from a more traditional cybersecurity approach to where we're at now. So for example, like years past, we would just be defending against simple viruses or spam. Now we're up against, globally organized criminal groups, targeting against us. So it's a pretty big challenge for, I guess, us to transition from just how we used to operate to how we need to operate now, and just all the safeguards we have to put up.
I'm gonna say ditto to everything that everybody said so far. When I first looked at this question, it was hard to pick because I think there's, depending on the size of school, and I think for all sizes, funding is a big deal, because whether it's funding for software, or whether it's funding for human people to analyze those logs, react to different things, funding for educating people. We just did a phishing simulation last week and sent out 770 some emails, and 51 people provided username and information. Now, I will say it was a very lifelike phishing simulation. So it caught some people. But I think funding is one of the big ones. That, and for especially for the smaller schools, I think, and even for myself at a bigger to medium sized bigger school, staying current on everything is hard for me. I mean, I don't know what's all new with the cybersecurity. And just as you think you've kind of got one thing kind of figured out, well, then the bad actors are changing things on how they're handling it, and they're coming at it from a different angle, and things like that. So I think the education part too, but my biggest one is probably funding.
Funding is one part, and to tie into that as well, there was a vendor presentation I was at, probably at iTech a few years ago. I don't remember the name of the company, but the presenter had a very good point. It's like, don't get all wrapped up in the shiny. You have plenty of vendors that are knocking on your door saying, hey, we got this great new fancy whiz bang, whatever it is, that'll protect you against cybersecurity. And of course, there's going to be a premium cost to it. But yeah, I'm just going through, Google and Yahoo just announced that they're going to start enforcing schools have SPF, DKIM, and DMARC records all set up. And if you don't, in February, they're going to start blocking email messages coming through. And so I went through a list of the schools that I work with, and I mean, it's something is, I'm not going to say it's simple, because there's some technical parts of it. And I've been working with email, a lot of parts on it, but simple thing of making sure that your SPF is set to block and DMARC is set to block all the email messages coming from sources you're not set up for. There's not a huge, I mean, the cost is in just amount of time on it. And it takes about, when I've been helping schools, it takes me about an hour to set up the initial part of it, and maybe 4 follow-ups throughout the month, which are maybe 10, 15 minutes each. And once you get that in place, it's almost next to impossible for a foreign actor to spoof a staff member to just tell your business office that they want to change their direct deposit information to a bank account of their choosing. So, and then I think the other part is too, it's, don't start off on the deep end and start with pen testing if you don't have some of the basics things on, like adopting a particular framework and going through and doing the vulnerability assessments and network vulnerability scans and stuff on it. Do those simple things first before you get into the weeds, seeing if you can break into something.
I agree too. I just did an audit of a school in Michigan, and no DMARC, no SPF, no DKIM set up. And I'm guilty on the DMARC one. DMARC for me is the barrier, because of the number of legacy things that we have that are using email, be it HVAC systems. We just upgraded our printers or copiers this year, so that's not as big an issue as it was in the past. But it's the things I'm afraid I'm not going to think about that are going to all of a sudden get blocked with DMARC, because you have to know, what IPs are going to go out and that you're using. And so, but SPF and DKIM, really, that's the simple ones to set up. That's literally just DNS entries. Doesn't take hardly any time at all. And there's tools out there, especially if you're using the Google Suite. They have a tool right in it that says, check your domain. Here's what's wrong. Click this button. We'll tell you how to fix it.
So I kind of gather there's a lot of issues, right? As somebody who got the email that Dan was talking about, it did look pretty good. So I'm going to guess that most of our teachers got caught by that. I know because I got some emails from them about that. So kind of moving on to the next question here, kind of the same idea there. With the threat landscape so wide, where do you prioritize your focus first when beginning the journey towards better security posture for your district? And again, whoever wants to start can go first.
I think Scott nailed it. Start with the simple, the things that you can manage right away and handle, whether it be, your DNS stuff, whether it be just talking to your staff, sending out an email once in a while that says, I will never ask you for your password, because if I need to get into your account, I'll change your password. I had a teacher, I'm not kidding you, fell for a phishing scam twice in 1 week. Caught on right away that he did it and let me know. I won't tell you what his new password is, but it reflects the fact that he fell for that twice. So it's out there, but yeah, start simple. And then look at what's available. I think one of the biggest things is when you start looking at buying or purchasing services, like Scott said, don't go for the first one. There's a lot of them out there. Talk to the people around you. And if you're a smaller district like we are, talk to districts around you and see if you can pool your resources and then maybe get something. So on the EDR side, a bunch of us went with the same vendor and talked to him and said, if we all go, would we get a better price? And he was like, yeah, I can get you a better price. And so it was kind of nice. We brought the price down. It wasn't quite half of what it was for face value, but pretty close.
Yeah. I would say take advantage of, the first part where you should start is look up and find a framework that you can work with. K12 the website K12 has a fairly straightforward framework, which is really just kind of be a checklist. It's like, hey, have you done this? Have you done that? Do you have your vulnerability assessment? Do you have EDR? How are you protecting your workstations? Do you have two-factor authentication turned on? And it gives you a chance to go through and at least have something to put up against it on it. I know, of course, I'm going to stand on switch hats for a little bit on it. Is that I was on a team that negotiated a statewide network vulnerability assessment through Martin Yarbrough and Associates, and since I'm not trying to push a lot of things on there, but for most schools, $3,500. And Martin's actually providing almost everything you need to be compatible with NIST 800, including the network vulnerability assessment, which is a scan once a month. But he also does pen testing. He also does phishing. He also does the survey part of it. So spends 4 hours. You just answer a bunch of questions, and you'll find out where you are in the threat landscape and where you need to pick up information and stuff on. Great resource. But even if that's out of your budget, sign up for the MSISAC. A bunch of free resources there available as well that are awesome for getting to know where you should be at security wise.
In Atumwa, our approach has just kind of been starting with the low hanging fruit. So looking at what folks are our biggest targets in the school district. If their computers or accounts were to be compromised, we couldn't initially afford CrowdStrike and EDR on every staff member's computer across the district. So we started with, the business office, the HR office. Nurses have a lot of documents that they've downloaded that are on their computers that have a lot of student information on it. and kind of just started with those users and expanded out from there to now covering all administrators, majority of other staff members, and then on the IT side, we've put in things like for example, none of us use our primary accounts for anything that requires elevation. We have secondary accounts, and all those secondary accounts, if we need to RDP into any type of server, we have Duo, which is, two-step authentication for that RDP session. So, those are just kind of basic things, don't cost a lot of money that you can do to strengthen your security. And I know Tyler's, he probably has a lot more to add. So.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's just leveraging what you have available to you, or at least evaluating all the solutions you have. Like when we rolled out, we originally had Microsoft A3, then bumped to A5, but even in A3, we still had a ton of resources that we just weren't tapping into yet. So really just kind of evaluating what you have access to and making sure you're actually utilizing everything. A lot of it's free. A lot of it's actually not that hard to implement. ACLs, make sure your management accounts are secure. MFA where you can. We have MFA on all of our VPNs, our servers, and it, like Wayne said, it's really just a low-hanging fruit. And most of the time, it's very cost-effective, if not free. And it's usually stuff you already have access to.
Yeah, I guess, and don't forget that is it Dom Do It Now? The OCIO office is giving free EDR license, managed EDR licenses backed by their SOC for schools. So most school, your school's going to get at least 4 licenses, if not 14 or 75, depending on your size. And even if you only get 4 licenses, just turn around and install it on the. If you don't have a SOC monitored EDR, install it on the machines that would be think about the machines that would really ruin your day if they got encrypted with ransomware on it, and install it on those machines first. And that's a great resource too. And it doesn't take much to set up for it, and it gives you a good starting point for some of these things as well.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot more for me to add. I don't think here. You guys hit it pretty well. Yeah, a big one for me is the Lance kind of hit on it on the first question, is educating our users, because once that information gets out, it's you can change passwords and stuff like that, but by the time you realize it's too late. And so really educating our users more is probably, but all that low-hanging fruit, there's a lot to do. There's a lot you can do without needing much of a budget, except for you need somebody to be able to do it. So you need a budget to pay them to do that. And, there's all the other things that are still going on. And, a lot of our curriculum is going online. And so, there's more and more things that the technology department is being asked to do. And this is an important one, and it can't be forgot. So I hate to come back to that budget thing, but it's not about the software always. Sometimes it's about the having the right people in the right places to implement the free stuff.
Yeah, I think you guys kind of cover that. There is a lot of different ways to go into this, but make available what you have, reach out to resources you got. Talk about the teacher side of it. I think if I can add anything, it's the fact that, the reason why I think it's so difficult is you still have so many teachers who are very not well versed in how technology works, right? So I was tech director at Ames at the start of COVID, and I had an elementary teacher who was complaining about the flash drive not working because they said it wasn't giving them internet. So they're very confused on what a flash drive was and what it does. And so that kind of was just that little obstacle. I'm like, okay, before we get to the next step, you're going to have some learning around that. So I think that highlights some of the problems you have, at least on the user end, which seems to be a big area to go to. So this kind of feeds, again, these questions were kind of arranged in a certain way. So think about this. What is the most thing you already talked about? The first thing, what's the most important thing you have done in regards to cybersecurity for your district or organization? So what's the number one thing you've done?
So I couldn't pick one. So I noted like 4 or 5 that I think were critical that we've kind of already touched on. But EDR, moving everything to Intune, A5 security, MFA, and then deploying. Many of you probably have a knack, but we just deployed ClearPass, and I think those are 5. I know I didn't follow the rules here, but 5 things that I think have been pretty critical for our organization.
Yeah, to add on to this, I mean, yeah, all those are super critical, and I hope all you all are using those already. I think what's been very beneficial for our district, and I'm grateful we've had the opportunity, is just the time and the resources that we've been allowed to dedicate specifically towards cybersecurity initiatives. Last year, I spent most of my days just doing cybersecurity, and it's been great. It's really propelled us forward. Our defense is not perfect, nobody's is, but it's a heck of a lot better than it was. And it's given us the ability to do a lot of these types of tasks internally now. Like, we do our own limited pen testing internally. We do regular vulnerability scans and can do the remediations in-house, just because we've had the opportunity to dip our toes into some of these projects. So just, I guess, the time and resources, if the district can allow, that type of time to be focused towards those projects, has been huge for us.
I'm going to have to say that multi-factor authentication probably would be the most important thing that we've done. I think that is probably most obvious, because it is required by a lot of your insurance companies now, that you have that. If you're going to have any type of cybersecurity, they want to make sure that you have multi-factor. They're going to start adding things. As a matter of fact, I think NIST 800 is what they're going to require you be at the minimum level of in the future. But yeah, 2-factor for my staff, even though some of them fought it. And my wife just gave me a big thumbs down when I mentioned that one. It's the most important.
I'm gonna again echo that. I think luckily I didn't have to fight that battle. It was already done when I got into Ames, so it had already been done. But that was probably the most important. But beyond that, we have contracted with Martin Yarborough, and I don't want to make this out to be a commercial for him, just like Scott didn't. But because we didn't have people on staff that had those capabilities or all of that knowledge, bringing somebody in right away that did and walked us through the process of all that, asked all the right questions, and then was able to do a presentation for our administrators and school board. And I think it always, those presentations from an outside expert seem to go over and hold more power than if I'm just up there talking to them. And so they got a bigger reaction out of our administration and school board when there was a presentation that was done by an outside entity showing some of our vulnerabilities and some of that. So I think that was a big one for us. That has allowed me to go further with things, having them on board and realizing it more than just me telling them, somebody else telling them.
Hey, I want to just quick piggyback off of Dan. There is one of the best things I've done is with the cabinet, we have went through a tabletop exercise, and that provided a ton of buy-in. If you don't have that seat at the table, for those watching this after the fact or watching right now, see if you can get some time when your administrators meet, either if you're in that, on a daily basis or weekly basis, or if you're not, see if you can get time to go through a tabletop exercise. I'm happy to share mine if anyone wants to email it. But we went through a scenario as if we were having a cyber threat. And then I paused during the tabletops to ask, okay, what would, from an administrative perspective, what would your stance be right now? Would we have school tomorrow? We're going on day 3, no internet. How are teachers going to pivot, right? Those types of scenarios playing out really got them, I think, to think and then buy into a lot of the initiatives that we've been implementing.
Yeah, I would, that's one of the things that I think it's put pretty low on the table, the tabletop, pretty low on the table, pretty low bar set for, people doing tabletop exercises, but there isn't a school out there that doesn't do a fire drill and tornado drills, active shooter drills. Cybersecurity shouldn't be any different on it. A tabletop exercise is the drill for that particular part of it. So I'm going to say the most important thing that I've done is probably, again, I don't feel like, I feel like I'm doing commercials now. Yes. So MSISAC, free resources sign up for, and then the free resources that they offer, but they have monthly webinars telling you, it's like, hey, here's the current threats, here's what the trends are. You get emails a lot of times before things come out. It's like, Apple just had a vulnerability alert on it today that I got an email from MSISAC on it. So, so it's the education side of it. It's like, I'd be the first to admit I don't know what I don't know. I turn around and start pulling things off of it, but getting your education on things on it, and even looking for things like the Secure Iowa conference or security conferences that are free to attend if you can take the day off to go to visit one of these in person or whatever, and the presenters that they typically bring in have invaluable information on types of things that are happening currently and keeping up to date with what the cyber landscape is currently.
Scott, we got a little bit of a question here from Peggy, asking if you could expand on the webinars a little bit, what you're referring to.
So if you join MSISAC, which is free and just do MS multi-state information sharing side of it. But if you go to sign up for it, they actually they do a monthly webinar. So as a member, you get alerted saying, hey, it's the last Tuesday of the month, I believe, typically, and you're free to sign up. It's only for SLTT, state, local, tribal, and municipalities. But so it's limited to that, but it's all geared toward, it's a federal group, so it's nationwide, a ton of resources that they have available for you on that.
All right. Now I'll say from my end, again, my role has been mostly as a tech coach for the majority of the last 10 years. So bridging that gap between teachers and tech, right? So having to explain why we do the things. And when we rolled out the two-factor, I went to admin first, then went to teachers, having to explain this is why we're doing it, because this is what you guys have access to. And then after how many of them failed these phishing attempts this last week, again, mentioning why we do that thing. I think that's the thing why, and I think probably all of you guys probably agree. Unfortunately, in the last couple of years with what's happened inside the states, some of our bigger districts, some of the attacks that they've experienced, it's a little easier maybe to get that why across. Looking at what's happened to Des Moines and Cedar Rapids in particular. I'm going to kind of jump ahead 2 questions what I originally had. So I'm going to go here and then boom. Speaking of which, because I think you guys already mentioned this, and maybe you don't have to say a whole lot more on this, but how can we better prepare than teachers and staff to navigate cybersecurity?
I'm actually listening on this one more than going to contribute, because that's a good question that I would like to know better how to do that. We have beginning of the year with our bloodborne pathogens and things like that. We have a little cybersecurity and phishing example that they have to go through. But I know that 90% of them start it, flip to a different tab or walk out of the room and then come back. And Patrick's one of them, and then comes back and just answers the questions at the end that are the same every year. And so I'm going to sit back and listen on this one more than I'm going to.
I'll say for us, kind of a critical piece is we knew we would likely not be able to win with either teacher unions or administration of finding time for professional development around cybersecurity. In the grand scheme of everything that they need to cover at the beginning of the years and throughout the years, it's difficult to get that time. It sounds easy, it's not. And so what we tried to do is, like, for example, go with some of the more premium subscriptions with KnowBe4, which provide real-time social indicator feedback to our staff of what they missed in the email that they clicked on. And so I can't promise them and force them to do training, but as soon as they click on that email, it highlights, hey, these 3 things, this header, the way this, the misspelling, those types of things, it gives them real-time feedback that I know they look at, because I hear them, tell me they don't love it, but they look at it and gives them some feedback about what they should have looked for. So that's kind of one piece of just trying to, better prepare staff and what they need to look for. Because phishing emails are very popular right now. Another thing too is just we challenge our teaching and learning staff, which ultimately gets down to teachers, is just, how would you function in your classroom if you didn't have network services for a day, week, or month? And even though this sounds like a crazy hypothetical, this is carried out through Iowa school districts in recent attacks where these services have been down. And so they have those conversations so that at least they have somewhat of an idea how they might handle that if it does happen for us. I don't know if you have anything.
No, I mean, I'm all ears on this one too. It's tough enough to teach them on all the technology and all the moving pieces, let alone cybersecurity and all the ins and outs of that. Definitely tough. That's a big challenge. I'm ears on this one.
For me personally, I think it's going to be one of those things that, again, when the insurance companies mandate that we do this, that we have phishing testing in place, that we are following the standards, it's going to get a lot more attention. Right now, nobody thinks about it because it hasn't happened. And when it does, it's going to be too late. So that's my hope. I do get technology in service every year. I have to fight for it. And every year there's a tiny bit about, remember, don't give out your username and password to anyone. Don't fall for this. Don't fall for that. But yeah, I don't know how you better prepare staff other than try to get trainings in. One thing that I know is, like, on the KnowBe4, if teachers fail, then you can put them in like remedial trainings that they then have to do. And I've heard kickback against that. But again, it's like, wait a minute, if you don't pass it, what would you do with your kids? What would you tell them? Why are you different? Why is it that this is something you shouldn't have to partake in? So yeah, I wish there was a quick, real simple answer to it, but I don't think there is, other than I think insurance is going to mandate. Ask Spirit Lake, and I can't remember the other district that had passed their policy where they were going to allow staff members to carry guns, and the insurance company said, we won't cover you, and look how quickly they unpassed those. I mean, insurance is going to dictate, and that's just an example of how it happens. You can't live in this world without insurance.
To Lance's point on the KnowBe4, you can put employees in a clickers group, which just means they failed that test. You have a couple options. One is you could allow them to take some remediation like Lance is talking about. We will get pushback from our labor unions on this because then they want paid time for them to do these trainings that we're asking them to do that you are now saying are mandatory. And so our way around that, don't tell anyone here, is that if you fail, you're added to an additional phishing test that happens that month. So you get an additional test in addition to the one that you normally have. So that's kind of our way around trying to just educate.
One of the things that I think we did that I think worked out really well in our agency is that, we have a weekly newsletter. Email goes out to all of our staff members, and our internal tech department just basically posted a tip every week. We just had a tip. It's like, hey, if you got a email with an attachment that you weren't expecting, don't click on it. And it was just the simple piece in the newsletter that we just had, one tip a week, and it wasn't too much in their face, didn't give them any time to doesn't take any time for them to read it and just say, oh, hey, yeah, I should remember that particular part of it. And I'm not quite so sure, but I think we might have followed up some tips about phishing, and then immediately, within that week, we did a phishing attack on it, and just to see if they helped read, if they read it and picked that part of it up. But I think that's worked out really well without any pushback that we've had on that side of it.
I'm going to say that I like the one that you're talking about, Landon, if it does actually show them where the issues are. And then I do like the idea of resending another phishing attack, because that's what we do in the classroom. If a student fails, I want to reassess them after teaching them. So that's kind of the thing to go around there. I will point out that our most recent phishing, internal phishing attempt that we did, it was a good thing because Dan was out of district. I was out of the high school for the morning. I had a meeting at district office. And so it was kind of fun just because I came back and then I got all the questions. It was interesting, the ones I get. But I do think it's important because, again, you guys know this, the users, they vary so much, right? We talked about students in the classroom, how they vary so much on their knowledge. I got one teacher, I got to make sure I'm helping because he doesn't have a cell phone, does not own a cell phone. So two-factor for him is a little bit more difficult. Like when he lost his piece of paper with all his codes, or he left it at home, he said. He left it at home. I'll believe that. It's just, I think that's good practice, teach and reteach. You can't assume the young teachers know what they're doing either. And I can tell you that because I know I helped a young teacher recently. And of course, there's a post-it note with all their passwords on their computer. And I'm not talking digital post-it note. I'm talking the paper kind right there where a kid could grab it. So obviously there's some learning to go there too. So, all right, we'll move on to the next question. Again, if you guys, the attendees, if you guys have any questions, put them in the chat. I'll open it up later so you guys can actually ask the questions out loud too. So moving from teachers to students, let's say you had the opportunity to be in front of students. What would be the number one thing you would teach students to prepare them for living in a digital world then, based on everything we kind of talked about tonight?
We'll go first.
Yeah, I think just from what I've seen with, working with the students and even just my siblings is password management and hygiene. Just don't use the same password for literally everything and don't use the default that they just ship with. Learn how to use a password manager. I mean, I had to train my siblings how to use it and, various staff, but most phones even have it built in nowadays. So it's really just pointing them in that direction and showing them that capability. That would be a big one.
All right. Again, I don't follow the rules, so I have two here, but I apologize. One is just encouraging students to think critically about the information they're digesting online. Is it information that is credible, reliable, or not? There's so much information online. Our kids sometimes are just so quick to the first article they read, that has to be the truth and the whole truth and nothing but it. And that's not the way that, unfortunately, the internet operates. That's number one. Number two is that there are consequences for online actions. And I know we've been preaching this for years. And I always try to tell students that, you know what, you may think that your Snapchat with a threat or whatever it is secret, but there's not been a single time that I haven't been able to work with the police department to identify the name of the student, the location they were at, and what the snap was. And so I always kind of remind students, like, there are consequences for things. Be smart in what you do.
I'd say them actually too. And just anything on the internet is permanent. I mean, anything they post or anything they say, there's a copy of it somewhere archived off, and someone's going to see it, eventually. It's permanent.
I mean, I'll give you a quick example. And I promise that I'll shush here, but we've put some things in place that obviously are monitoring what are plugged into our district computers. And we had a student recently who brought a Flipper Zero. If you don't know what a Flipper Zero is, look it up, right? It's something maybe tech directors should be aware of, right? And he told us all day long in the office with his parents that he did not bring this device until we searched his bag. And we could tell him the exact date, time, location, and teacher that he was with when he plugged this device in, attempting to bypass our prox key cards and program his own key cards for the building. And so, it's just a reminder that, again, we have a little visibility into that, and just be smart.
I was going to say, I posted a link in the chat. I ran across this a couple years ago, but there's a really great curriculum called Cyber Start America. It'd be like maybe like you'd run it as an after school program or something on it, but it is related to middle school, high school students, and it starts off of everything with deals with cybersecurity, and actually kind of introduces them, if they have the aptitude for it, even the tools that they need to become a cybersecurity expert. And the program is robust enough that they actually have a point where in college they can actually gain college scholarships depending on how far they go with it and stuff on it. It's a look like a really cool tool. There's actually a state scoreboard. One of our schools was top in Iowa 2 years ago. Jefferson or Greene County was, and trouble is our tech director didn't even know a teacher was teaching and stuff on it. It's kind of changed a little bit going on it now, but that was kind of a cool tool that I saw a presentation on, and not for everybody, but yet it might be a good, the entry level one kind of courses would be everything that they would need to know of how the security attacks happen and give a lot of basic information on it. So
I think, teaching the kids or preparing them for a digital world, more than just on the cybersecurity side. I always talk about how I don't want my kids to be doing things that are wrong, but I would rather they do them now and at a much lower level than when they're adults, because the consequences are less. We can teach them and talk to them all they want, and there's always going to be those kids that are going to, at some point in time, choose the wrong path. My honest thought is I would rather they do that in my district than later on in life when they're adults and have to suffer adult consequences. The biggest thing is the pictures that they're all taking and sending of each other and not realizing it's probably child pornography because the people are underage and they don't even think about it. They're just doing that. Being able to, instruct them, teach them at a younger age is better. And the same thing though, when you talk about cybersecurity, as a young kid, I've got a couple of kids whose accounts, their passwords were, I just the other day I got something from the state tech center and said, this person's account is on the dark web for sale. And we just went to that kid and I said, we got to change your password. And I said, do you use that password for anything else? And they were like, I use it for everything. And I'm like, oh no, how many times I got to tell you guys? Different passwords for different things. But yeah, I teaching them is the best you can do is give them the information they need and hope they listen.
Well, speaking of students, of course, that's one of the things now that the hackers are after is student information, because if they can steal a student's identity when they're young, that gives them all the time till that student tries to open up a bank account or a credit card when they're 18. That there's a lot of times that whole period of time they don't necessarily know that their identity was stolen until that particular point in time, giving the hackers a long time to use it. So and of course, I think I heard one of the best defenses is have, as a parent, to go in and lock your child's credit history, basically lock it so they can't get into the credit reporting agencies and stuff for their students and stuff on. But
I will say that as an esports coach too, it's been interesting to explain to kids why they need two-factor setup for the BattleNet accounts for Overwatch 2. That's been a requirement that's been new since they moved to Overwatch 2 last year, and that's been a great teaching point for them because I ask them, what happens if you lose your account? They've been playing on forever and all your skins and stuff like that. That's been one easy in for some of my students that I deal with on a daily basis.
And on that point, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask a question, but I'd like to hear from anyone else on this panel or anyone in the audience. Just student MFA. Has everyone ventured down that path for 100% student MFA? How has that gone? Is there just too many challenges to that?
We haven't. And as a matter of fact, we had to talk to our insurance company this year because they required us to have MFA. But when we explain, that our email systems in particular is a walled garden where not all our kids can't email just anyone, and nobody can email them without being whitelisted, they were okay with it. I don't know. That's a tough one because you definitely want to teach them that that's a thing, and a lot of the stuff they're using, they have to have it. But at the same time, it's like, don't have your phones out, but have your phone out, or, use your Chromebook to log in, but I'm on my Chromebook. So how do I two-factor authenticate on a device that's telling me to factor authenticate on my device? It's kind of more of a pain at this point than we've been willing to bear, but I don't think it'll be too long before that's an issue.
I'll agree with Lance. We have not at Ames either gone down that road yet. We've had some internal conversations about doing it at the high school level, where we're pretty much guaranteed that everybody's going to have a phone. But we haven't yet. It's been thrown around a little bit and it's been laughed at, and but I agree with Lance. I think it's just a matter of time before we're going to have to come up with some sort of solution for all grade levels of students and just all accounts.
I can't even guarantee that 80% of my kids would have a cell phone at the high school. As a lower SES community, that is not as much as we think in the world that every kid has a cell phone. In my district, that isn't true.
Well, and we have some problems with the adults that, we have some dead spots in some of our buildings with the precast concrete and everything like that. In some of our buildings, we have some real dead spots, and it's a little bit of an issue as well.
I was just going to say, making sure your students have working cell phones with screens that aren't smashed in. That would be the difficult part, I think, too.
I'm with you on the dead spots. My 110-year-old high school is it's a Faraday cage. I mean, you get inside there, and it was a nuclear fallout shelter in the 50s, and it has survived 2 fires and a tornado. So cell phones are not a challenge for it.
All right, that's kind of bringing us to the end, and I'm going to stop screen sharing just a second because we'll give a chance for kind of all of our panelists a chance if there's one last thing you want to share, or multiple for Landon. So we'll widen the rules so you don't have to feel constricted by one. Any last comments to that? And then our attendees, if you have any last questions, you can throw them in the chat and we'll address them. But I'm going to stop screen sharing right now, just so we can see everybody a little bit more, and then everybody can kind of one last thing or one big takeaway you have.
I think for me, it's I love the saying, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. That anything you do to raise the bar helps you out something. So do what you can and work to do more, and also realize the landscape is always changing and you're never going to be perfect, and you're always going to be playing catch up because they have a lot more energy and a lot more time and a lot more desire to do nefarious things than I do to do good, if that makes any sense.
I think for me, the scariest thing out right now is, and we've talked a lot about phishing tonight, but, the thing is now AI is where we're coming up on AI. You get AI turning around and generating the phishing email messages and stuff on it. They are going to be darn right hard to pick out. And if you want a great example on what AI can do, if you haven't done a YouTube video search and listened to Johnny Cash's new single of Johnny Cash playing Barbie Girl, singing Barbie Girl, you can turn around and watch that YouTube video, and it is Johnny Cash. I mean, you turn around and listen to it. I mean, and he's singing Barbie Girl. So, the fact that now these tools are available to the hackers to be able to generate even better versions of it. I mean, it used to be your phishing attempts. You always were able to find out it's like things were misspelled, translation errors and stuff on it. But, we're coming up to a point in time where it'll be next to impossible to tell the difference between them, other than looking at those, actually doing some forensics to every email message that you kind of think might be suspicious on it.
I hate to do this, but I think I'm going to have to agree with Lance somewhat. And that's just that, sorry, Lance, that, for me and IT, like the way my head operates, like, okay, new firewall, check, right? Core switches, check, right? Cybersecurity, there is no end. So we have to pace ourselves. Otherwise, it is a burnout. And so when we do vulnerability assessments or scans and we get all this information, we're taking it in blocks. Like Lance mentioned, anything you do to remediate and to correct issues is puts you in a stronger stance than you were yesterday. And that has had to be the mindset for us because it's not a one and done, check the box, and there is no end date to it. This is around and is going to be something we deal with forever, at least in the foreseeable future. So, anyway, you're good. Tyler's good.
Well, I'll agree with, I think, something Lance said earlier, that goes along with what he said too, is something is better than nothing, and don't get paralyzed by how big of a thing it is, and don't think you have to know everything before you jump in. Go for that low hanging fruit. Turn on the MFA if it hasn't been already, if you haven't. And just start somewhere, and little by little is going to be better than doing nothing. And sometimes we can get that. It gets so overwhelming that you just don't even know where to start. I think you just got to pick something and pick some of the easier things to at least cross off the list and get that momentum rolling. But also realizing that it's not something you just check off your list. Okay, that's done. We'll revisit it next year. It's got to be that ongoing. Things are changing, things are evolving, and you just got to keep dedicating a little bit of time for it.
Well, I think our attendees present now or watching later, definitely if you want to learn more, we have the iTech IT conference in 2 months in Nevada, Iowa. Hopefully we'll have a lot of great cybersecurity sessions there. I want to thank all of our panelists for being part of this night. We're kind of like 52 minutes in, so I think we probably call it. I don't see any questions in the chat. Just pause real quick in case there's one more. But otherwise, just thank you guys for all of your information, all your experience and knowledge. I know this is definitely a field that it's ever changing every day. As Scott talked about the AI aspect of it. I think that's going to be interesting to go with many levels, not just on the fact that our phishing emails might actually be spelled correctly now, although they're still going to ask for gift cards for iTunes, which no one buys anymore. So I don't know why they keep asking for that. Otherwise, I want to thank everybody for that. I'm going to hit stop record.